Some women should just stick to coupons and coffee talk, he said, smirking over his laptop. That one line shattered something inside me. I was 46, recently divorced, and sitting in a half-empty living room in Phoenix, Arizona. A place that smelled like the lemon-scented cleaner I'd used to erase his fingerprints from my furniture. The man talking down to me wasn't my ex-husband. It was my former colleague, Tom Walters, the one who used to mentor me at the insurance firm where I'd worked for 18 years. He'd stopped by under the pretense of checking in. But as soon as I told him I'd invested part of my divorce settlement into stocks and a few rental units, he laughed like I'd announced I was joining a circus. You? Managing money? You'll lose it all before next tax season. That laugh haunted me that night. It wasn't just his arrogance. It was the echo of every man who'd ever told me I wasn't capable. When you spend decades being the reliable wife, the nice coworker, the understanding woman, people forget you can fight. But I had fought quietly for years. When my husband drained our joint account for his startup idea, I didn't scream. I documented everything. Every receipt. Every transfer. Every lie. When the divorce judge finally looked me in the eye and said, "You've been wronged," I walked out with $147,000 and a broken heart that no longer feared ending alone. That money wasn't alimony. It was the price of freedom. I spent 3 months learning how to breathe again. I'd wake up before sunrise, brew cheap coffee in a chipped white mug, and read everything I could find about personal finance. Index funds, dividends, REITs. Terms that used to make me feel stupid suddenly felt like keys to a new world. I opened a small Vanguard account, then a Fidelity IRA, then a joint account with my sister to buy our first rental property, a 2-bedroom duplex in Tempe. When Tom laughed that day, he didn't know I already had tenants signing leases. He didn't know the first dividend checks had started to arrive. He didn't know that for the first time in my life, I wasn't depending on anyone else to save me. But his mockery did something else. It lit a fire I didn't know I still had. Because sometimes you need to hear that ugly laugh one last time to remember who you're fighting for. That night, I opened my laptop, found the contact info for a female financial advisor named Rachel Mendez from Austin, and booked a consultation. She didn't talk down to me. She didn't flinch when I said I wanted to build a portfolio big enough to retire by 55. She just smiled and said, "You don't need luck, Linda. You need a plan." So I made one. I called it Project Phoenix. Because if men like Tom thought I was done, they were about to watch me rise from the ashes they left behind. And I wasn't looking for revenge. I was looking for freedom, the kind you buy with knowledge and courage. I didn't know then that in 3 years I'd run into Tom again. But this time the balance sheet between us would look very different. Confidence comes from clarity, Rachel told me in our first session. Her office was small, tucked between a dental clinic and a yoga studio in downtown Austin. The kind of place that smelled faintly of eucalyptus and printer ink. She was around my age, mid-40s, calm, sharp, and refreshingly honest. She didn't sugarcoat a thing. "Linda, you've been taught to survive, not to build. That ends now." That sentence stayed with me. I started tracking every dollar, every expense, every investment, every goal. My friends thought I'd gone a bit intense, but I didn't care. For years, my finances had been a fog of joint accounts and whispered justifications. Now, for the first time, the numbers were mine, clean, visible, empowering. I set up automatic transfers. $2,000 a month into my brokerage, $500 into a high-yield savings, and whatever was left went into renovations for the duplex. I learned to paint, to fix leaks, to post listings on Zillow. My weekends smelled like sawdust and paint thinner instead of heartbreak. Still, some nights, I'd stare at my laptop and wonder if Tom had been right, if I was just pretending to be someone I wasn't. Until one morning, a tenant called. "Hey, Linda. Just wanted to say thanks. The place feels like home now." That call, it changed everything. It wasn't about the rent. It was about proof that my decisions could build something good. By the end of that first year, my portfolio had grown by 11%. The duplex value had risen. I'd learned to read earnings reports like novels. But not everything was perfect. The old firm, the one where Tom worked, called me back for consulting help on a policy project. I hesitated. Walking back into that office meant walking into a room full of memories, and people who still thought of me as the woman who lost her husband and her nerve. But I said yes, because I wanted to see how it felt to face my past and not flinch. The first day back, Tom saw me in the hallway. Same smug smile, same polished shoes. He looked me up and down and said, "Didn't think we'd see you here again. Finally ran out of savings." I smiled. "No, I just decided to buy more." He blinked, confused. "Buy more what?" "Options," I said, walking past him. In every sense of the word. That was the first time I saw his smirk fade. Over the next few weeks, I worked quietly, delivered results, avoided gossip. I noticed Tom trying to peek at my reports, asking casual questions about how things were going. He didn't know I was consulting for 3 other firms at the same time. He didn't know I'd just made my first 5-figure profit from an ETF sale. He didn't know that I no longer needed anyone's approval. One Friday evening, I was the last to leave the office. The sunset reflected off the glass walls, painting everything gold. I looked around that building, the same one where I'd once been dismissed, diminished, and overlooked, and realized something profound. You can rebuild your life in the same place where it was once broken, and it'll never look the same again. When I walked out that door, I didn't feel small anymore. I felt unstoppable. It's strange how success doesn't silence doubt. It only changes its voice. Mine now spoke softly, disguised as caution. "Don't get ahead of yourself, Linda. You've been lucky. Every time the market dipped, every time a tenant delayed rent," that voice whispered again. But Rachel taught me something that changed everything. Money is emotional, but emotions don't make good investors. So I stopped reacting. I started planning. In my second year, I diversified, bought into an index fund, opened a small Roth IRA, and partnered with a local construction worker named Sam who flipped old properties in the Phoenix suburbs. We met at a coffee shop with sticky tables and too loud music, but his numbers were solid. I put in $60,000, he brought the tools and crews. Within 6 months, we sold a renovated home for $310,000. My share? Enough to cover 2 more duplex down payments. That's when the fear started to fade. I was no longer rebuilding, I was expanding. But not everyone liked the new version of me. My ex-husband, Mark, reached out one afternoon. His voice over the phone was fake friendly, the same tone he used when he wanted something. "Hey, Linda, I heard you're doing pretty well for yourself. Maybe you could help me out with." I cut him off. "Mark, you helped yourself for 15 years. I think you'll manage." He tried guilt. He tried charm. Then anger. "You're not the person I married," he snapped. "Exactly," I said. And I hung up. It felt like closing a door that had been creaking open for years. A week later, I got a LinkedIn message from Tom. Of course. "Hey Linda, saw your name pop up in some real estate circles. Guess you didn't lose it all, huh? Maybe we could catch up sometime." I stared at that message for a long minute. The audacity made me laugh. 3 years ago, his words made me feel small. Now they just made him look ridiculous. Still, something in me wanted closure. Not revenge, clarity. So I replied, "Sure, Tom. Coffee on me. I'll send you the address of one of my properties." We met at one of the duplexes I'd just refinished, gray walls, new fixtures, clean scent of fresh paint. He showed up in his same office where, trying to look casual but clearly nervous. "Wow, this is yours?" he asked, pretending surprise. "Yes. And 4 others." He gave a hollow chuckle. "Didn't think you'd actually make it work." "I know," I said simply. "You never did think much of me." There was silence. For once, he didn't have a comeback. He looked around, shifting uncomfortably, then muttered, "You always were too sensitive." That line used to sting. Now it only made me smile. Because I was sensitive, but I'd learned that sensitivity wasn't weakness. It was awareness. It's what let me see through people like him before it was too late. When he left, I stood by the doorway, looking out at the setting sun over the quiet Phoenix street. I wasn't angry anymore. I was free. That's when it hit me. My biggest investment wasn't in property or stocks. It was in myself. And finally, I was seeing the returns. By the beginning of my 3rd year, things looked solid. 5 rental properties, 2 ongoing flips, and a modest but growing investment portfolio. My days were full, my nights peaceful, or so I thought. Then came the email. Subject: Urgent, IRS verification required. I clicked without thinking. The layout looked official, logo, fine print, everything. It asked for account verification for my property tax filings. I typed in my details, hit submit, and didn't realize what I'd done until 2 hours later when I got a call from my bank. "Ma'am, we're detecting unusual activity. Were you attempting multiple transfers to offshore accounts?" My stomach dropped. It was phishing. I'd fallen for a scam. The next few days were chaos. I froze accounts, filed reports, called every helpline imaginable. My balance was intact, but the shame hit hard. After everything I'd learned, after all my caution, this mistake felt like betrayal all over again. I didn't tell anyone. Not even Rachel. I couldn't bear the thought of hearing, "You should have known better." But life doesn't give you long to hide. 2 weeks later, I ran into Tom again, of course. He was speaking at a business seminar I attended for networking. The irony wasn't lost on me. He noticed me from across the room and smirked. "Linda, still hustling, I see. Heard you had some trouble with your accounts." My heart stopped. How did he know? He leaned closer. "Phoenix isn't that big. People talk." That's when I realized someone from the property circle must have mentioned it. Gossip spreads faster than truth. For a moment, the old feeling came back: humiliation, defensiveness, fear. But I caught myself. "No, not this time. You know, Tom," I said calmly, "I did make a mistake. But the difference between me and you is, I learned from mine." His smile faltered, but I didn't stop. "You still measure people by how they look on paper. I measure by how they recover." He laughed nervously. "You always had a comeback, didn't you?" "No," I said. "I had a conscience. That's rarer." Then I walked away. That night, I finally told Rachel what happened. I expected judgment. Instead, she said, "Linda, every successful person gets scammed once, just not always by an email." That line broke something open in me. She helped me contact the right people, freeze any remaining vulnerabilities, and tighten my digital security. But more than that, she reminded me that mistakes don't erase progress. "You're not defined by what happens to you," she said. "You're defined by how you adapt." So I adapted. I started reading about cybersecurity for real estate investors. I joined local meetups for women in finance. And slowly, my fear turned into something new: awareness. Because when you stop pretending to be perfect, you become unstoppable. 6 months later, I got an unexpected call from a regional magazine. They were doing a feature on women investors who rebuilt their lives after divorce. I said yes. They photographed me standing outside my duplex, wearing jeans and a simple white blouse. When the article came out, the title made me smile. "The Phoenix Rises in Phoenix: How One Woman Turned Betrayal into Wealth." For the first time, I didn't feel like I was proving anything. I was just living. And the best part, I hadn't even reached the top yet. It wasn't fame, it was credibility. People started calling. Local realtors, small investors, even single mothers who wanted to learn how to take control of their money. I began mentoring part-time. It felt surreal. Me, the woman who once cried over credit card bills, now teaching others about compound interest and cash flow. Then one afternoon, as I was leaving a real estate networking event in downtown Phoenix, I saw a familiar car parked near the curb. Black BMW. The same one Tom used to brag about leasing for the image. And there he was, leaning against it, scrolling through his phone like the world owed him time. He looked older. Tired even. The shine in his eyes replaced by something I'd never seen before: worry. He spotted me and straightened up quickly, forcing that trademark smirk. Well, if it isn't the woman who made the front page. You're quite the star now." "Trying to be useful," I said. "You should try it sometime." He laughed, but it didn't reach his eyes. "I'm between things right now. Company downsized. You know how it is." I didn't. Not anymore. He kept talking, too much too fast, about consulting, about new projects, but all I heard was desperation wrapped in arrogance. Then finally he said it. "Listen, Linda, maybe we could partner on something. You've got the real estate connections, and I know the insurance game. We'd make a great team again. Again. As if we ever were one." For a second, I almost pitied him. Almost. "Tom," I said softly, "you once told me women like me shouldn't touch investments. Remember that?" He hesitated. "I was joking." "No, you weren't." I stepped closer, calm but clear. "You just couldn't imagine a world where a woman didn't need your permission to succeed." He tried to laugh it off, but his eyes gave him away. He hated that I remembered. "You've changed, Linda," he said finally. "I grew up," I replied. "You should try it." Then I walked away, not fast, not dramatic, just steady. Like someone who no longer needed to prove she could walk alone. That night, I drove home through the Phoenix lights, windows down, music low. My phone buzzed, a text from Rachel. "Heard about the article. Proud of you. Next chapter?" I smiled, because I knew exactly what came next. The money, the properties, they were just the beginning. What I wanted now was impact. So I started something new, Rise Fund, a small investment circle for women over 40. We pooled small amounts, vetted opportunities, and made joint decisions. No mansplaining, no intimidation, just learning and growth. The first meeting was in my living room, 6 women, 1 coffee pot, and a whiteboard full of dreams. By the 3rd month, we'd bought our first property together. By the 6th, we were mentoring others. And every time I saw one of them sign a closing document with steady hands, I felt something shift inside me, a quiet pride that went deeper than any dollar amount. Tom's world was shrinking. Mine was expanding. Sometimes the sweetest justice isn't revenge, it's peace. Suddenly, people who'd once dismissed me started acting like they'd always believed in me. Old coworkers sent messages like, "Knew you had it in you, Linda," and "We should grab lunch sometime." I smiled politely, but inside I remembered every time they'd let someone like Tom talk over me in meetings. Every time they'd called me sweetheart instead of analyst. Now they called me ma'am. Funny how money changes tone. One evening, I was invited to speak at a local women's business conference, Financial Freedom After 40. The event was small, held in a rented hotel ballroom with folding chairs and paper name tags, but to me, it felt like stepping into a new life. I talked about fear, about rebuilding, about the night I cried over my first stock loss and still showed up the next morning to learn why. I told them the truth. You don't need to be fearless to change your life. You just need to be tired of being underestimated. The applause was loud. Not the kind that feeds your ego, the kind that fills a room with shared strength. Afterward, a woman about my age approached me. Her name was Karen, and she said quietly, "I've been where you were. My husband calls it our money, but I'm the one who earns it. I'm just scared to take control." I held her hand and said, "Start with one account. One investment. Just one. The rest will follow." That night, on my way home, I stopped at a red light and looked at my reflection in the rearview mirror. Same face, same freckles, but a completely different woman. And for the first time in years, I realized I didn't just survive betrayal. I transformed because of it. But life wasn't done testing me yet. 2 months later, I got a letter from a lawyer. It was from my ex-husband, Mark. He was filing a claim, saying some of the properties I'd bought were jointly funded from money during our marriage. A stretch, legally speaking, but one that could tie up everything I'd built. I sat there in my kitchen, holding that envelope, the air suddenly thick. The same house where I'd planned every comeback now felt like a courtroom. My first instinct was fear. My second, anger. Then came clarity. I wasn't the same woman who cried through divorce papers. I had my records, every statement, every receipt. So I called Rachel. And then I called a lawyer of my own. A woman named Elaine Brooks, mid-50s, sharp as glass, with a tone that could slice through arrogance. When I finished explaining, she smiled slightly. "Don't worry, Linda. He's bluffing. And if he's not, we'll make him wish he had." I exhaled long and slow, because this time I wasn't alone. I had a team and a spine. I placed the letter on the table, turned off the kitchen light, and whispered to myself, "Let's finish this right." The storm was back, but so was I. Courtrooms have a strange smell, a mix of old wood, coffee, and nerves. It had been months since Mark filed the claim, and now, finally, we were here. He sat across from me, wearing the same suit he used to wear for client dinners, except now the confidence was gone. He looked smaller somehow, not physically, but in spirit. His lawyer started strong, arguing that part of my investment funds originated during the marriage. They waved around a few old bank statements, hoping to confuse the judge. Elaine didn't flinch. When it was our turn, she stood calm and precise and said, "Your Honor, my client's investments began 2 months after the divorce settlement was finalized." She used her own funds, verified by deposits, contracts, and tax records. The plaintiff's claim is baseless. Then she looked directly at Mark and said, "And frankly, it's disappointing that a man who repeatedly misused joint funds now wants credit for her discipline." The judge's expression didn't change, but I could feel the shift in the room. When I took the stand, Elaine whispered, "Be honest. Don't defend, just tell your story." So I did. I told the court about the nights I spent reading finance books instead of sleeping, about rebuilding after humiliation, about documenting everything because I'd learned, the hard way, that women have to prove what men are simply believed for. I didn't cry. I didn't shake. When I finished, the courtroom was silent. Mark tried one last time to speak, said something about unfair treatment, but his voice wavered. The judge stopped him mid-sentence. "Mr. Harris," she said, "this court sees no merit in your claim. The evidence is clear. The respondent acted independently and legally." Gavel down. Case dismissed. It was over. Outside the courthouse, I stood on the steps, feeling the Arizona sun on my face. Elaine turned to me, smiling. "You just made it official, Linda. You don't owe anyone a damn thing." I laughed. A real laugh, the kind that comes from somewhere deep, somewhere healed. Later that night, I drove to the first duplex I ever bought, the one where it all began. The porch light still flickered, just like it had 3 years ago. I stood there for a long moment, remembering the scared woman who'd painted those walls, trying to silence the echo of men's laughter. She had no idea how strong she was becoming. As I locked up and turned to leave, my phone buzzed again, an email notification. Subject: Investment opportunity, Rise Fund expansion. Rachel and I had talked about it for months, turning our small women's circle into an official cooperative. Real funding, real structure, real reach. I smiled at the screen, because I knew this wasn't just about money anymore. This was about legacy. And the best revenge against those who doubt you is becoming too successful to even notice when they're gone. 2 years after that courtroom day, life looked nothing like the one I'd imagined at 46. The Rise Fund had grown beyond our wildest hopes, from 6 women in my living room to nearly 100 members across 5 states. Some invested a few thousand, others a few hundred, but all of them carried the same fire, the hunger to own their lives again. We held our quarterly meetings in a shared workspace downtown. Every session began with stories, not about profit margins, but about courage. A retired nurse who bought her first condo. A divorced teacher who started a thrift store online. A widow who built a food truck business with her son. These women weren't just changing their finances, they were rewriting their worth. And I was content. Not rich beyond measure, but secure, respected, and free. One afternoon, as I was leaving a client meeting, I stopped by a small cafe on Roosevelt Street, the same one where Tom had once laughed at me. I hadn't seen him in almost 3 years. But as fate would have it, there he was, sitting alone in the corner, scrolling through his phone. His hair was grayer now, his posture heavier. He looked up, our eyes met for a second, and he smiled faintly. "Hey, Linda. Long time." I nodded. "Yeah, it has been." There was a moment of awkward silence. Then he said, half joking, "Guess I should have taken your investment advice back then, huh?" I smiled, not with pride, not with spite, but peace. "Maybe. But I think we both learned what we needed to." He nodded slowly. "You did good." "Thanks," I said. "So can you, if you stop underestimating people." I didn't stay long. Just long enough to pay for my coffee, tip well, and leave. The sound of the door chime as I walked out felt like punctuation. The final period at the end of a long, painful chapter. Outside, the Arizona sun was soft and golden, the kind that makes everything look honest. I sat in my car, rolled the window down, and breathed. I thought of every insult, every betrayal, every man who thought my silence meant weakness. And then I thought of every woman I'd helped stand taller. That's when I realized my story wasn't just mine anymore. It belonged to every woman who'd ever been laughed at, dismissed, or told she couldn't. Because in the end, I didn't just become wealthier than the man who mocked me. I became wiser than the woman I used to be. I started the car, looked at the fading cafe in the mirror, and whispered, "Sometimes you have to lose everything to realize you were the treasure all along." And I drove away, not to escape, but to keep going. Because strong women don't chase endings. They build new beginnings.